All right, it is Monday, July 16th, 2018. Thank you guys for tuning in to the SneedMobileTech podcast. This is podcast number 3. Can't believe it's already been 3 of these that I've been doing, but I've been having a lot of fun with these. I hope you guys are enjoying them. What I get to do in these podcasts is just basically just spend a vast amount of time with the podcast on a handful of topics. So I get to cover a lot of detail, get into many specifics on certain topics that don't get much run here on the channel during the weekly updates. So with the podcast, I get to cover some of the things that I really enjoy, and I hope you guys enjoy them as well and you find them relevant. So I'm going to start today's podcast first with some Apple news and some rumors and some things that we're expecting for the next generation of iPhones. So what I'll do is I'll start with just basically some rumors, but rumors that I feel are very, very credible because of who in particular is actually throwing this information out there. So it appears there are many reports that Apple is going to be discontinuing the iPhone X. Also thrown into this would be the iPhone SE. So a lot of reports are supporting this particular claim. There's a lot of different leaksters and people that claim to be within the know that are saying that we can expect another iPhone X to be reproduced, but there's probably going to be some form of a successor, and the iPhone SE is probably going to be discontinued as well, with no successor in the pipeline for Apple. So most people are saying this, most of the credible people in the business, but there is one credible source that actually is saying that there is no cancellation of the iPhone SE. But pretty much across the board, many are saying that the iPhone X, as we know it as the iPhone X, is not going to be continue to be produced. Now that makes total sense. The iPhone X is like a 10th anniversary of the iPhone, so the fact that they're not going to make it anymore makes perfect sense. But they're definitely going to have a successor, something that we're considering to be like an upgraded version of the iPhone X. So maybe it's called the iPhone 11 or something totally different, but it's going to look like it. It's going to basically be the same thing, but with upgraded specs and maybe a different, couple sets of features or something like that. But the iPhone SE brings up something interesting because the iPhone SE is the last of a dying breed. It's a compact device that's very small, can be handled with one hand, and a lot of people that like smaller phones, that's pretty much their only option. The screen size, I don't know, I think it was like at 4-inch. I mean, no manufacturer really makes a phone that small anymore. So if this is all truly the case, then what we're left with for 2018 for iPhones are going to be the rumored 3 models for the catalog. So the budget 6.1-inch LCD iPhone, which is probably going to be around $700. It is going to use an LCD display. We have the iPhone X successor, whatever it's going to be called, and then we have some form of a Plus or a Pro model, which is rumored to have 3 cameras on the back. So, we've got these different rumors flying around, and we don't really know with certainty what's happening. Apple just doesn't let this stuff come out, but sometimes we do get credible information that does turn out to be true. But it is interesting to see that the production that Apple is going to be discontinuing, they've been facing some production issues in the past. Up until this point, I feel like Apple has been making too many devices. From a company that from when it first started making the iPhone, it was a single model, and then for a while it was the 6, and then the 6 Plus, right? And then we started to see the 6S and the 6S Plus, and they were still manufacturing the 6 and the 6 Plus at the time. And then when the 7 dropped, they were still making the 6S and the 6 Plus, or 6S Plus. So they've always been making many, many models just to keep up with production on even some of the older models that lag back about a year. So having lots of all these different models just didn't make sense. I'm sure Apple has considered that, and they're probably looking to streamline production. So if the demand is for the new phones, no reason to sit back and make all the old devices, continuing to produce them and holding up production. And of course, this is all for profits. This is about making money. So I can't fault them for that. Okay, so let's transition over to something a little bit more interesting, which, less about production and more about some new features. eSIM news. So some of people have actually asked me, I remember somebody brought it up, I forget who it was, but in the live stream on last Friday, there was somebody who brought up eSIMs, and they asked me what I thought of, that particular technology. This is basically something that could, really change the game when it comes to how people use their devices on certain carriers. So the new generation of iPhones may actually introduce the new technology. The way I see it with this particular technology is there's no SIM card required, so there's no actual physical SIM card that needs to be put into a phone for it to have a network. So it'll operate, getting calls and using LTE and stuff like that. So this is actually really good, at least to me, my perception, my opinion. You don't have a tray, you don't have a port, no pin tool required to eject it. You just basically have over-the-air electronic activation, which is something carriers were doing long before, not needing, a SIM card. I remember, I've been a Verizon customer for quite a long while and used to just activate phone by IMEI, so through a database and over-the-air activation. Now, the two companies that are involved in this technology in terms of developing it, I believe are two German companies. They're like the leading tech developers of this. I can kind of see like the activation implications with this particular technology. You've got, a lot of people buy their phones unlocked, which means that they are free to move to different carriers as they want to, as long as the device is compatible with the network. This basically gives these iPhones potentially the ability to kind of go back and forth to whichever network the user sees fit. So whether you're with AT&T or you're with T-Mobile or Verizon or what have you, you're free to come and go as you please. If somebody's offering a good deal or a promo, or if you move and a network performs better in your region and you want to switch, you could do that. So there's basically not going to be any type of SIM locks for carriers to have, which is great. You just basically are going to buy a device and you're going to go with whichever carrier you feel like, which I think is excellent for the consumer. So from the consumer standpoint, this is great. Now, I've already heard of certain phones and models being eSIM compatible. So it's not just the iPhones that we're hearing about this, but Apple Watches will have this ability as well, I'm sure. There's already devices that are using this technology. I know that the second generation of Pixels that are operating on Project Fi, Google's MVNO, I know those are eSIM. They use eSIM, so they don't actually have a physical SIM card. So it's already been in use, but for Apple to adopt it and utilize it would be huge. It would be enormous because the U.S. cell phone market is so heavily Apple-based. So many people have iPhones, and when they upgrade, they continue to buy iPhones after the fact. So if they're going to go the eSIM route, it's definitely going to have a huge effect on carriers and consumers alike. So this could potentially be a huge headache for carriers. We know that carriers like to SIM lock their devices to keep people locked down onto their network and have them spending money with them as opposed to another carrier. Carriers are not going to like this. There's just no way around it. The only people that this helps in particular is Apple, because it makes their phones probably a little bit more water resistant, one less opening, one less port, one less tray. And it helps consumers because they can come and go to the carriers as they please. So if they wanted to start with Verizon or start with Sprint and then move to another carrier, they have the freedom to do that. So, we'll just have to see if this is the case. These are just rumors, but, Apple doing this would set great precedents. We'd probably see a lot of Android phones start to adopt this. Definitely the Galaxies within the next generation. It's kind of follow the leader when it comes to these types of decisions. So, I'll keep you guys posted here on the channel. We'll see what comes of this, but we'll know more in the coming months when the new generation of iPhones are getting closer to their launch date. All right, so let's go ahead and transition. We're going to stick with Apple. But I think actually what this has to do with, and a little bit more similar to kind of what we saw with the first bit of news, but this has to do with Apple partnerships. So for some of you know that like Apple has contracts with certain constructors of smartphones. So you may know that Apple deals with Foxconn. They also deal with a partnership in Wilstrin, which will likely be involved in the new iPhone generation construction and assembly. So Wilstrin is going to be contracted along with Foxconn. They're probably going to have to compete and bid with each other for the job, to assemble the new iPhones. This is probably, a good move for Apple because it allows them to have companies compete against each other which definitely helps their bottom line. So it could save them money in the short term and the long term. The only thing I could think of is if you're going to have two different companies in construction and assembly, is, what does this mean for quality control? So, for instance, somebody who gets a phone assembled by Wilstron, or somebody else gets their phone, which is constructed by Foxconn, will there be a difference in any type of, quality? Or, are we going to see systematic issues and problems in, people returning phones and failure rates and stuff like that? So that could potentially be an issue. So yeah, I mean, not only that, I think Apple's also, they've been trying to figure things out with their chipsets, their SoCs. Who's going to be the provider? Are they going to go with Qualcomm now? Are they going to continue to do business with Intel? A lot of rumors says, hey, Intel's kind of on its way out. Apple doesn't want to deal with them, or, that's just the rumor. Maybe by 2020, Intel's kind of out of the picture for Apple, and maybe they become, in a situation where they're going to be doing their own thing or relying on Samsung or whatever the case may be. We'll have to wait and see. But I think all of this is important because of how big Apple's market share is in the States. And it is interesting to see kind of like how Apple can still leverage its power even though it only sells, just a few models of phones. They are, a high leverage company, and, doing business with them obviously can be very prosperous and profitable. So we'll just keep tabs on this, and we'll see what comes in the future as I get more details and things are confirmed. And the last bit of news from Apple, iPhone sales are stinking it up in India. So for those of you that may not be aware, India is kind of a big smartphone market. In the first half of 2018, they have sold fewer than 1 million units of iPhones. So this means Apple is going to continue to struggle in India, which actually is the third largest smartphone market in the world, I think only behind China and the US. So, Apple has already restructured their leadership within the country in India. India is a very interesting place when it comes to like market share and selling smartphones in this particular region. Budget phones seem to do really, really well in India, none of which Apple actually produces or sells. So the types of companies that do very, very well in India are makers like Motorola. I see a lot of different budget devices making their way there, like the Moto E's, the Moto C's, which most people don't even know they make a Moto C, right? There's a lot of different, budget level or entry level Samsungs that sell there, ZTEs, stuff like that, like Xiaomi. A lot of these companies that don't really have much footing here in the US do very well in places like India because of the affordability. So, Apple's they're too expensive. They're too premium. They can't get footing in India because their devices just can't get down to the price point that those people feel that they can spend on their phones. So that being the case, I think Apple's always going to struggle there. It's going to be really hard for them to see any form of success. Expecting to sell more than 1 million units in a place where they're not going to spend the equivalent of $700, $800, $900, $1,000 on a smartphone. It's just not going to happen. So I don't know if this is just a case of Apple, being insane, or just not understanding their business model, not fitting in that particular market. But I think they probably should, realign their focus in India, or, just potentially stop with the investment into that market. It may not be feasible unless they realign their market strategy in India and are able to produce a budget-minded iPhone that the people of India can actually use and feel comfortable buying, have confidence that it's something that they want. So in the foreseeable future, I just don't think Apple's ever going to do very well in India. So that's probably what's going to happen there. All right, we're going to transition away from Apple. Let's talk a little bit about Google phones. So the Google phones for 2018, we're seeing more and more renders and leaks of potentially what they're going to look like. So it looks like in this particular render, you could see that there is the larger XL model, and then you have the smaller, standard Pixel 3. This is probably exactly what they're going to look like. You're not seeing much of a change from the back end. That glass at the top, that little, portion at the top, it's metal back. It looks to appear as it's still metal, I think. The difference is kind of on the front when you're looking at the display, or at least the display side. So, the Pixel 3 is set to be, I think, slated at 5.4 inch in display size. The 3XL is going to be larger at about 6.2 inches. So I think the footprints of the phones are going to stay the same, but the display sizes are getting bigger because I think the bezels are getting smaller. You can see that the 3XL model definitely has a notch that is very noticeable at the top of the phone. So that's kind of like the new thing. We see that design being utilized by a lot of different manufacturers, including Apple, and the Essential phone had the notch as well. What's kind of interesting here is you see that the smaller Pixel 3 does not have a notch. So that phone doesn't have it, but the 3XL does. And I've always wondered that about the Pixel devices, why a different manufacturer makes, like in the first generation Pixel, for example, HTC made both of them. They were identical in design, just battery size and screen size was different. And then in the second generation, LG made the larger one, and HTC made the smaller one. So they were different. Display, differences, things of that nature. So here again, we have a difference in, their design choice, I guess, on the front. So it's interesting to see that. In terms of the ratio of the screens, I believe they're all going more modern with the 19:9 or 18:9 ratio. I'm hearing and seeing both of those getting thrown around. We're going to expect the Qualcomm Snapdragon 845, single rear camera on both devices. All renders and leaks show one camera on the back, but I am seeing two front-facing or selfie cameras for both devices. So all the renders and leaks I see are showing this. So I think we could feel pretty confident that there's going to be two cameras on the front. This may be for HDR. This may be for the depth perception. Maybe they're doing some camera tricks this generation. I don't know. But the back has one camera and the front's going to have two. And I actually think it is noticeable. I don't know if I have any other renders of it, but you could definitely check it out. There's definitely two cameras on the front for both models. So something else that we're hearing about is potentially a new watch, which could be called the Pixel Watch, could be called the Google Watch. We just don't really know. Nothing really solid there yet. But if they were to make a new Pixel Watch, the Google company, they're going to be pushing the new Wear OS rebranding, which honestly I don't even think anybody really thinks about Wear OS or Google's watch operating system. It's kind of like an afterthought. There haven't been any new hardwares that have been sold from any OEMs. LG used to make a smartwatch. Samsung is rumored to be making one. Motorola, the Moto 360, the Moto Watch was great, and I think it stopped after the second generation. I don't think they made a third. So Wear OS, or whatever they're calling it now, the rebranding of it is just not going to get anywhere unless it has a device to push it. So who knows? We're expecting the Pixel phones really, really soon. We'll know more in September for sure as we get closer to the release date. If a watch is going to come out, it's probably going to come out at the same time or around the same time. So we'll definitely be expecting something soon to be announced or leaked or something like that. All right, so let's shift away from Google and Apple, and let's go over to ZTE. So the last few weeks have been kind of interesting to see the politics going on with ZTE in the U.S. So apparently the ZTE ban has finally been lifted after many rumors and a lot of people speculating that the business end for ZTE might be in shambles and may not be able to recover. But it looks like they're back to business. They have reached an agreement. They are now doing business again here in the U.S., which is a very important market for them. So the Chinese smartphone OEM basically has been struggling with political type sanctions here in the U.S. for the last 2 years. ZTE has probably paid almost $3 billion in fines and operational fees to do business here in the U.S. And U.S. lawmakers have always been concerned about ZTE in terms of security risks. The U.S. definitely is seeking more monitoring and control of what's going on with ZTE. They want the final say on their shipping, their accessing of user data and stuff like that. Like, it's really, really tough on ZTE. I mean, they have a lot of things going on here. So the most recent ban for ZTE started in April of this year, so April 2018. Now we currently have this agreement where the ban has been lifted. They've signed an escrow. I believe there was a $1.3 billion fine that was sanctioned and paid. So ZTE shares have already started to bounce back. In fact, I believe they have soared 24% increase in Hong Kong. So everybody's pretty confident that things will go back to business for ZTE and there shouldn't be any issues moving forward so long as everything is working out. So I think this is really good news personally. You know, ZTE I think is an important company here to the US smartphone market. They make flagship devices that are very good. They make budget end devices that are very affordable and pretty good. You know, you can find them on a lot of the MVNOs and prepaid carriers. So Boost, Metro, Cricket, they rely heavily for, you know, a lot of these smartphones that are very affordable, entry level and budget minded for users that don't want to spend on big phones or can't afford them. So this is definitely good news. And actually in Q1 of 2019, ZTE is going to be releasing a 5G capable smartphone. So hopefully, even though the ban had, you know, previously been in effect, now that it's been lifted, the production of that 5G phone won't be delayed. I'm hoping that the development just continued to go through and they were in hopes of, you know, restoring business efforts. So I want to make sure, you know, that people know that ZTE is important in 5G because they're going to have a 5G ready smartphone very early 2019. So if you want to get your hands on something, you have some options there as early as 2019 Q1. So it's good to see the competitive nature of the U.S. smartphone market be restored. ZTE is an important player to that. You got a lot of value phones there. You got a lot of high-performing phones. ZTE makes good hardware, very stock version of Android that's very usable. So it's good to see that they're kind of back in business. All right, so what I have here is a diagram, kind of a visual of Android manufacturers and their failure rates for their devices. So I wanted to present this, so go ahead and check it out. You can see the manufacturers' failure rates on the left, and to the right, you can actually see the failure rates of certain models. So we have a lot of good data there. It's interesting to see kind of who's at the top in terms of most failure rates. So Samsung is the highest failure rate for manufacturers. You can see they're at 34%, Xiaomi coming in at 13%, Motorola the third at 9%. Then you have LG, Lenovo, and so on. So, you know, and then HMD Global, which is the company that makes the new version of the Nokias. You can kind of see where they're at. Now, 34% is a very high failure rate. Now, Samsung does make a lot of phones, so I don't want to sit there and try to justify it, but that is a lot of phones having failures. 34% is very high, considering the next closest, you know, number 2 is at 13%. So, and Samsung makes tons and tons of phones, so that's going to be a super, super high number of models and stuff that are going to be affected by these failures. Now, if you look to the right, we have the failure rates. And of course, this data is taken from Q4 of 2017. We have the failure rates by model. So the Xiaomi Redmi 4, which is a very popular device, you know, it's got a high failure rate as a single device. So now, if you look to the left, you'll see Xiaomi is number 2 as the highest manufacturer failure rate. And then you see that one of their phones has the highest individual rate. Also, you see Motorola's top 3, so third highest failure rate. You'll see that they also have a device, including the Lenovo, because Lenovo owns Motorola. You'll see that 2 of Lenovo and Motorola phones are in the top 3 for highest failure rate for a smartphone device. And there's an HMD Global, that's the Nokia 6. You can see those rates are high too, and a couple of Samsungs there. So that all makes sense. You've got, you know, a couple of Xiaomi's in there, a couple of Samsungs in there, a couple of Motorola's. This is just unfortunate that these particular phones make it in there, but it kind of is what it is. Their phones are failing, whether it's catastrophic, maybe it's, you know, battery issues, or, you know, people are returning these devices because they're flawed. I don't know what the case is. They don't give you specific reasons, but the devices are being returned. Who knows if they're being refurbished and then recertified or whatever. But it's just interesting to see which Android devices are struggling with failure rates and which OEMs seem to be having issues making phones that are more dependable. All right, now we're going to get into some carrier information. We're going to go away from the hardware side. Let's kind of look at some MVNOs and some small-time carriers that are even kind of new to the game. So we'll start here with Xfinity Mobile, which is the Comcast wireless service provider, which is going to start actually doing some things that users aren't going to like. So the first thing they're doing is they're going to restrict video streaming in terms of resolution. So I think what they've been giving people, I think they've been giving them 720p video quality, possibly even HD, full HD, I'm not really sure. But now that's going to be restricted. They're going to put the clamps on the resolution, and they're also going to be slowing down mobile hotspot and tethering speeds. So they're going to be shifting the resolution for video down to 480p, and the hotspot data is going to be slowed down to 600 kbps, which is really slow. You're not really going to be doing much with 600 kbps. It's just, you can't really watch video on that of any, notable resolution. It's just really sad to see them transitioning to this. They're saying, Xfinity Mobile at least, they're saying that they're trying to help customers not go over the 20 gigabyte data threshold, that soft data cap, which serves as the cap that potentially users could be deprioritized during times of network congestion. So they did want to tell you though that they're going to be offering by the gig options, which they're going to be selling at $12 per gig. So if you want high-speed data, 4G LTE high-speed data for your hotspot, you can pay for it. They will provide it to you at a rate of $12 per gig. And you can also pay extra for the 720p resolution. So this makes sense that they're setting the video resolution to 720p, as that is what Verizon does. And of course, this is an MVNO piggybacking off of Verizon's network. So, Verizon's probably either calling the shots here, or they're just trying to align it similarly to what Verizon is doing. Now, the Wi-Fi hotspots are, not being throttled for usage if you're paying for it, so that might be something to consider, but that cost is really, really high. I'm going to come back to this in a moment, but I'm going to shift over from Xfinity Mobile to Spectrum Mobile, which is Charter's new wireless provisions. So basically we have been hearing rumors, and they're pretty solid. Now we actually have Spectrum Mobile is up and running. So the Charter wireless service provider has launched this particular service. It's very, very similar to Xfinity Mobile, the company that we just talked about. The only difference here is I think they're charging more per gig of data usage. So instead of the $12 per gig, they're charging $14. And I think this has to do with the way that the contracts are set up. They're supposed to be like anti-competitive contracts. So I think there's clauses in the legalities of it that they can't, undercut Xfinity or anything like that. So now this service is only available to Charter customers of home internet and home provisions. So the cost is at $45 per month, just like Xfinity. It gets you 480p video resolution, 20 gigabytes of that soft data cap threshold. You do get 5 gigs of high-speed hotspot internet, and then you're slowed down to 600 kbps. Now that's a little bit better than Xfinity Mobile's, which just slows you down to 600 kbps to start. This actually gives you 5 gigs of high speed and then slows you down. You can also pay more per gig, obviously the $14 per gig for high speed. You can also pay more for the additional resolution, getting 720p. So in terms of market analysts, a lot of market analysts are predicting an addition of 250,000 customers by the year's end, so by the end of 2018. And there are a couple reasons why they're only predicting 250,000 people using the service. The first issue is they do not offer the sales of iPhones. Now think about it. The iPhone is probably the best-selling model of phone here in the US. If you don't carry it or sell it and don't make it available to customers, customers here in the US rely heavily upon their service providers to also offer hardware. they're not as keen to buying unlocked and buying through manufacturers. So if they offered it, I think they would stand a better chance to be selling more of their services because they provide more of the hardware, meeting the needs of the customer from end to end. So that's one issue, not having the iPhones. Now Xfinity Mobile does offer the iPhones, so that's kind of a distinguishing factor there. And I think the other issue is that the deal itself is not bad, like $45 per month. That's an attractive deal, but you think about the restrictions. Somebody may use the service and say, hey, why is my video buffering at 720p? And that may frustrate them. They might not want to watch a video at 480p, and they may not know that right away. Some of the less informed consumers may not know. Also, hotspot may deter people. I know tons of people that frequently want to use hotspot data, but they need it to be of the LTE variety that is faster. So being throttled down to 600 kbps is just too slow, I think. Now, for somebody who doesn't care about video resolution so much, doesn't care about hotspot, maybe this is a go. $45 a month is good. But when it comes to features, I think, people can just do better. You can go with a service provider that offers a more premium experience, less restrictions, more higher performance from the network and what your phone can do with it. So to me, these plans are a no-go, but to some, I'm sure that they would work, and that's a pretty good deal. And the last thing I'll leave you guys with here on today's version of the podcast are a couple of deals, and they're going to be coming from Verizon and T-Mobile. So starting first with the T-Mobile's deals, we have some buy one, get ones. Now, there are some restrictions here with T-Mobile. Of course, you need to buy the first phone, and then the second one, you're going to have to add a line to get the deal on the second phone. So the first couple of deals that they're offering is on the Samsung Galaxy S9, which is, Samsung's most recent, flagship phone, so it is still new. You can get $720 off of that phone. I think the S9 Plus also qualifies, and the S8 Active also qualifies. So you get the first phone and then the second phone up to $720 off of it by adding a new line of service. Also in these deals, they have the LG G7 ThinQ or the LG V30. You can get $750 off the second phone. All require a 24-month installment plan. Obviously, this is going to lock you into T-Mobile for 2 years, so you're married to T-Mobile for that duration of that because it's coming to you in the form of credits. I think these deals start July 20th. Those deals are actually available now, but starting July 20th, you can get a Samsung Galaxy S8 for $199 and a Samsung Galaxy Note 8 for $399 from T-Mobile. So those deals are for July 20th. I'm pretty sure that those are also installment plans, so you're going to be on those installments for 2 years to get that deal. So if you don't mind being married to T-Mobile for 2 years, you can get some hardware at a really, really good price for some really, really capable devices. Samsung's make some really good phones, and they see some amazing speeds on the T-Mobile network. They really seem to work well together. Now, switching over to Verizon's deals, we have a buy one S9 Plus or Note 8, and you will get $800 off the second phone. They're also going to throw in a free memory card that matches the internal storage of the device. So I'm guessing it's going to be like a 64 gigabyte card. They're also doing a buy one LG V30 or G7 ThinQ, get $750 off another. And they're doing a buy one Google Pixel 2 or 2 XL, get $650 off the other. So those are pretty good deals if you're interested in those from Big Red. Buy one, get one free on the Moto Z2 Force. I've been seeing that thrown around quite a bit this year, so that's not really that new. Now keep in mind with these Verizon deals, you must add a line of service. All of these deals go with a bill credit, so the phones have to be on installments. So again, you're locked into 2 years. You're married to Big Red for those 2 years, those 24 installments to get those credits. Now they're calling these specials back to school BOGO deals. I don't know who goes to school in July here in the U.S. I'm not really sure, but they're calling them back to school specials, but they are available now here in July. So that's pretty much it for the podcast, guys. I tried to include some topics that I thought you might like, stuff that usually doesn't get onto the videos during the week. But I wanted to make sure I got some hardware stuff in there, some MVNO information in there. So thank you guys for watching. Please like the video, share the video. I appreciate you spending the time watching the podcast. Got a couple good videos coming out. Please check out the Patreon page. I've got some exclusive content on there that you won't find anywhere else, including YouTube. So definitely check it out. Consider supporting SneedMobileTech there. Please make sure that you ding the bell to get notified when I upload new content. This is Sneed from SneedMobileTech, and I will see you guys on the next video, on the next podcast. Peace.